Welcome to Brockley News Extra, the programme where you get the chance to hear all you need to know about what's going on in and around the hospital, as well as updates on other events and people who work in the community. Hello, I'm Ron Laver, and in this programme you can hear our extended coverage of the 2017 RNOH Trust AGM. You'll be hearing from the Trust CEO, as well as reports from finance and nursing departments, plus later a must-hear presentation by Dr Rui Loureiro, the head of Aspire Create, the Centre for Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology, on some very exciting work being carried out by his team. But first, to open the meeting, it was Trust Vice Chairman Joe Carlebach.
Can I welcome everybody formally to the RNOH AGM. As I'm sure everybody will be aware, this has been a challenging year for the NHS, with many issues that you will have read about in the press, ranging from A&E wait times to funding to vacancy rates. But I'm pleased to say that for the RNOH, who some have described even recently as the jewel in the NHS crown, it has been quite a good year. We've had great progress with our new build. I think we're one of the very few hospitals in England, certainly, to have a new build going on. Perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I'm told that it's actually a month and a half ahead of schedule. Oh, sorry. No, I've probably damned it. It's running well, shall we say that. I'm also delighted to say that we continue to have excellent patient outcomes and that our reputation is enhanced by the treatment that we give to our patients. And that's something I think that we can all be incredibly proud of. I'm also delighted to say, in terms of our RTT figures, and that's the patient wait from referral to treatment, we're the most improved in the entire nation of any hospital. We even had a nice letter from the Secretary of State to thank us for that, and that is, I think, in the current climate and the difficult times we face, an outstanding achievement. The last thing I really want to say is all that good news would not have been possible without the fantastic staff that we have. And I hope everybody here will join with me in extending our thanks to all our staff, the incredible work they do, the care they give the patients, and the excellent outcomes that they're able to deliver. I think they're fantastic. I've been on the board now 3 or 4 years. I visit many hospital trusts, and none of the other trusts come anywhere near the performance of our staff. So thank you very much to all of you for that, and please pass that message out from this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Good afternoon from me, Rob Hurd, Chief Executive of the hospital. I think, as the Vice Chair Joe alluded to, we as a hospital remain proud, and rightly proud, and you, the staff in the room and the people involved with the work of the hospital, the great volunteers that we have, that actually the evidence is, it isn't just what I say, the evidence is out there that we achieve some really good results, and this is just sort of a snapshot of a few things. So this is significant patient harm events. And there aren't many hospitals in the land that could go a whole year without significant adverse events occurring to patients. But I also need to make clear that actually our reporting of adverse events, our learning from adverse events is very important. So this isn't about that nothing ever goes wrong. It's also equally important that when it does go wrong, we learn about it. But there's evidence that we have low incidence of significant harm, and we have significant evidence. I've told you every year with growing pride that we have yet again had another year with no MRSA bacteremia acquired on site. No other hospital in London can claim the track record that we have, and indeed across the country. The levels of C. difficile, hospital-acquired infection, we stand proud against the world in our infection control record in this hospital, which is remarkable for some of the scale of operations and the big operations that are taking place. Activity levels higher than ever before. So we're continuing to grow. So those of you who have supported the hospital for many years, growing is a good thing in terms of our sustainability. It never generates us enough money, but it generates us more and more security. The need for our services is as important as ever before. So we had the highest ever NHS and private patient activity. in the year we have just reviewed. Now, the rate of referrals into this hospital growth has not been as high as previous years, partly because we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that we get the appropriate referrals for the services that we provide, to make sure that the people who need us get through and use our services. But even after turning away a lot of our customers, the referrals continue to grow. And I'll repeat the statistic that I do every year, that if you track the average journey distance per patient travelling to any acute hospital in the land, we have the longest journey distances on average of any hospital, and so that shows that people feel willing and able to travel to come for our services. So there must be a demand and need for them, and all the better that we get those good results. So the National Institute of Health Services Research approves research trials. We've been saying for years we do research here. We're an academic centre, but in terms of evidence of track record of properly accredited, peer-reviewed, published research and research trials, patients recruited into research trials, we're now hitting 700 a year, and that's from a starting point of 5 or 6 years ago of 0. And there is more to do. We know that we introduce ourselves to 27,472, last time I asked somebody to count, new people each year. New patients come into contact with the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital. So if you take out all the people that are coming back for follow-ups, who have been here for long-term treatment, those new introductions. And we're only recruiting 700 of them into trials, so it's good progress, but there's more that we can do as a research centre in doing so, and we have more research publications. So obviously we had the totemic moment last financial year, very symbolic of support for the future of Stanmore as a site for the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital long into the future, as the approval of the redevelopment programme and effectively unlocking 90, I sometimes round up to 100, depending on which figures you want me to add up, £1 worth of investment into the Stanmore site, the largest single investment into any orthopaedic department anywhere in this country, and remaining the largest centre, critical mass of neuromusculoskeletal services in this country, and standing up to the world when benchmarked on our indicators, the volume and case mix and the outcomes that we achieve. In very back down to earth terms, that means we've got that new ward block going up as the first phase. So we also achieved some major digital investment. Again, congratulations to, I try and say this every year, Saroj Patel, our Director of IM&T, who, in a world in which it is very difficult to attract money into digital technology investment because there are so many other priorities for them, she helps bring money into the trust to keep these things going without being to the detriment of other urgent requirements. So we've kept going with the IT investment. But it's not all good. We've got to recognise in our annual general meeting that we have faced up to and continue to face up to some major challenges, not least of which is essentially the workforce crisis facing the NHS more generally, and particularly and elements of which that affect us. So, as Joe says, whilst we're the most improved trust in the country, bar none in the level of access, referral to treatment, performance, a bit of an arbitrary target that we have to recognise that. The important thing is, are we tracking our patients? Because we'd want 100% of our patients to be treated on a timely basis with no detrimental harm caused by waiting longer than they should. And that's the most important thing to measure. But the proxy that is taken is 92%, and we've done better than anyone else in the country at improving that over the last year, and remain very much at the top in orthopaedic access. Again, all the more remarkable given that we're a tertiary centre that is not dealing with routine referrals in from local GPs. And so that is good, in summary. Recognising our staff turnover vacancies, major challenge. Now, the latest month, however, saw the lowest levels of turnover that we've seen for 4 years. So 4 years ago, 16% of our staff left every year. We're down to 12%. The vacancy level is getting close to 10%, which is about the lowest level for some time. And the workforce figures are overall improving in a very challenging environment. Now, on the other hand, in individual pockets, in individual areas, there are massive challenges in vacancy levels, our ability to find the right people, recruit into the post. So again, the headline might be okay, but that doesn't take away from any of the very real and significant challenges we face in many departments in the hospital in keeping holding on to good people, recruiting and retaining good people, and keeping them at the trust in the subspecialist skills that we need. The use of temporary staff was getting out of control with massive agency bills, lots of interim people coming and going on expensive daily rates. This is going back over the years, and over the last 12 months we've pretty much eliminated non-clinical interim daily rate staff. There's a handful left for compared to where we were, and we've also we have to hold our hats off to the ward managers, the nursing leaders out there who have worked in a very challenging environment to keep nursing agency costs at a all-time low level. And we know that comes with the human cost of how you have to be flexible and work day in, day out on staying on top of staffing the wards and the departments effectively. And yes, so none of that takes away from the fact that we still have major challenge in our vacancies. Now, we have also tried to get out there more. So whilst we're rebuilding here and trying to develop all the things I've talked about, we also recognise we live in a wider world and we have to play a role in that as a national centre. Obviously, I'm particularly proud of the work that we've done on getting it right first time, because I've done a lot of work on it with Professor Briggs, and that is a £60 million grant on a national programme which is being run through Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital. I think last year's AGM I said a lot more about that, what it was, but in essence it's about a clinically led, data-driven process looking at evidence for unwarranted variation in clinical outcomes and trying to reduce that, and having clinicians working with hospitals across the land on reducing unwarranted variation. The National Orthopaedic Alliance, which started off as a small and friendly club of ourselves, Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre in Oxford and Royal Orthopaedic Hospital in Birmingham, Wrightington Hospital, part of Wrightington, Wigan and Lee, has now expanded into something called a National Orthopaedic Alliance Vanguard with 21 members, benchmarking and looking at data, comparing ourselves, and we've had National Vanguard, what's called Vanguard funding, to support doing more work in the area of working with those 21 centres on showing what good looks like in orthopaedics. The slightly more contentious area continues to be the development of partnership working with University College London, our academic partner, who remain committed and have ring-fenced resources to build a new academic centre on this site. And the bioengineering hub is very much in their sights to get going on, we hope soon. The Royal Free and UCLH and our colleagues at North Central London Sustainability and Transformation Programme are all in a difficult place where the NHS, which faces massive challenges in terms of the demand for our services and the limited resources that we have, and I think the North Central London gap is running into hundreds of millions of pounds in terms of its projections as to what we need to provide for the population and what we're actually projecting that we will have in financial terms. And we are trying to play a part in what some of the solutions to that are, but it's a very difficult one to solve. Our financial performance, which Trevor will tell us about, we hit our plan, basically. We beat our plan, I think, last year in the end. And of course, the punishment for beating your plan is you get more money taken away from you. So we had another tariff adjustment this year that went against us. And so we continue in this year to be in deficit, but beating our plan. So the world is no longer in a place of whether a hospital can have a surplus or a deficit or break even. Pretty much 94%, I think, are now have a deficit actual position. So we're running out of any hospital in the land that can live within its own means, and like many, we are effectively therefore having to borrow to keep going, because we don't receive enough money each month to fund our operating costs. So having eliminated all our borrowing a few years ago and having surpluses, we're now in a position where we're building up debt and borrowing again, as is the whole of the NHS provider sector. But therefore it is a success in that environment to manage our cash, so we're able to keep paying the bills and the payroll and keep trading despite the challenges of our financial environment. So a couple of good things I just put on the end here, and also a reminder of where we are with the CQC, but I wanted to just thank our volunteers, services, volunteers and all the contributions they've made. Is that a picture of Keith there? I think it is. He's at the back recording for Radio Brockley there. So that's pretty incredible. 22,000 passengers. Just had so much positive feedback. So that's a good example of the volunteer community, us all working together, of solving a tricky problem, which is the Stanmore site and getting from one part of it to another. Because not only do we have the longest average journey distance of any patient on average to get to the site, once you've made it through the world-leading access times that we now have, you then have the longest average journey distance to travel on the site to find the imaging department and your ward and out, etc. I wanted to remind you that we have, I used to be able to say, more outstanding ratings in our CQC grid than anyone else, but there are now about 4 or 5 hospitals that have more outstanding ratings than us. We remain overall requires improvement, and we're condemned to be so until we're bad enough for the CQC to come back and inspect us to make us better. So we're in a bit of a bind on the CQC because almost the better we do, the less risky we are, the less likely they are to come back and re-inspect us to get our requires improvement up. But we know a large chunk of that in terms of this, where they really went in for the estate was on services for children and young people, and there was the inadequacies of our children's services, which obviously is a core part of the rebuild, and outpatients, the waiting times there that we had once here, and a lot of that was, we felt, driven from poor data, but also recognising we do have weaknesses that have been worked on. So what is always incredible to me about this is that our medical care, we are pretty clear that as a surgical hospital we have a very good reputation, but the CQC on medical care to rate us as outstanding, and that is obviously something that we need to hold on to going forward. My diagnosis of the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital is it's been over 100 years on a slow rise. That rise is slightly going up a bit at further pace at the moment because we're rebuilding a significant chunk of the ward block. When the academic centre is built and when the private patient facilities are built and when Princess Eugenie then this trajectory of improvement and basically delivery of this vision will be, the pace of improvement will grow. I think the most important thing I would say that is a focus for us now is, given that we've broken the back of the rebuild, they will have it. It will be slow, it will be tortuous, but this place is being rebuilt and will be rebuilt. Therefore, excellent patient care needs to continue, but great staff experience now is the most important thing, because we, to retain our status as a leading hospital, will need to recruit and retain the best staff. The evidence is that happy, engaged staff, high quality staff, engaged with the vision of what we're trying to achieve, engaged with what we are as an organisation, will join us on that journey, and will recruit and retain good people to do that. And we have some fantastic people in this organisation, and we have to develop a cohort of the leadership community that gets the most out of those people. And I think the potential is so massive. If we can we're going to have fantastic buildings, we've got a fantastic set of staff, and if we can get the most out of them, everything is within our gift as this being one of the best institutions in the world for orthopaedics, and indeed as an NHS centre of healthcare, best in the world. And I think we're on a journey to do that. It's slow, and some people don't feel it day in, day out, but if you look at it over time, that is happening here in Stanmore. And I think that's really exciting, and I'm very proud to be associated with this institution. But great staff experience is the next thing. So the people who were, some of you were out there 5 or 6 years ago who didn't believe we would ever get a building going up on this site. I'm telling each and every one of you, those that don't believe that this is going to be one of the best places to work in the NHS in 5 or 6 years' time, that is the mission that we are now on track to deliver. So you can hold me to account on that over the years ahead. And when I'm standing here in 5 years' time and we look at the indicators for our staff and how engaged they are and how our vacancy levels are down, and we're comparing ourselves with the rest of the NHS as the best place to work in the NHS. So in 5 years, we'll have some of the buildings will be open, some of them will still be being built. We'll have expanded our private facilities so that we can provide our clinicians, consultants and others with the facilities in which to carry out their private practice and help us reinvest that back in the NHS. We will have expanded ourselves as a UCL campus. Whilst UCL is our prime partner, we will have multiple academic partners across multiple in different disciplinary groups, and we will have found our identity in North Central London, which I think is an interesting challenge for us at the moment in terms of what we can contribute locally, given that it's the expectation of the NHS that we do so. And we will continue our journey to be the National Centre for Musculoskeletal Health, not just an orthopaedic hospital. Thank you very much.
Chief Executive Officer there, Rob Hurd, with his overview of the past 12 months and looking forward, of course, to the future.
When you leave hospital, you might be able to help us. The RNOH has opportunities for volunteers in many roles, such as outpatients guides, befrienders and some departmental placements. We also have an active patients group who, amongst other activities, conduct scheduled visits to wards and departments and report back to the Trust Board. London's longest running and multi-award winning hospital radio service, Radio Brockley, also welcomes new patient visitors, presenters and all who want to get involved with entertaining and informing our patients. If you think you can help or are interested in learning more, then please contact the volunteering office on 020 8909 5394 or email volunteering@rnoh.nhs.uk.
This is Radio Brockley.
Reminder, you're listening to Radio Brockley. This is Brockley News Extra, and this is our extended coverage of the RNOH Trust AGM. In just a few minutes, Director of Nursing, Professor Paul Fish, will be talking quality, and stand by for Dr Rui Loureiro. But before that, Trevor Mayhew, Interim Deputy Director of Finance.
So we first start off looking back to how we ended last year. As Rob told you, we had a planned deficit of 7.4 million. We actually beat that by 600,000, delivered a deficit of 6.8 million. In terms of our capital spend, the most exciting one is we started the spend on the new inpatient ward block. As you can imagine, rarely does an accountant like spending money, but this is one very rare exception. We've also got other major schemes in terms of spinal cord injury centre expansion, a new fluoroscopy suite, other medical equipment totalling up to 1.3 million. We also did a theatres lease buyout, which effectively meant we spent 1.2 million and avoided us spending 450 grand a year to lease these the two theatres 9 and 10. Probably one thing to note as a common theme through our capital investment is the amount that we owe to our fundraisers and to those who donate to the hospital, as they contributed to nearly all of those major schemes that the Trust was able to put through in the last financial year. We have various financial measures and targets, and for last year we hit our external financing limit. That's a very flashy accountant's way of saying that we managed our cash appropriately. We hit our capital resource limit, which is another flashy way of saying we've spent the amount of capital that we said we would, and we did our capital absorption rate of 3.5%, and I won't even try to explain what that is, but it's a techie NHS thing and we met the target. Where we did fall down is in paying our invoices under the Better Payments Practice Code. The expectation is that we will pay at least 90% of our suppliers within 30 days, and we didn't do that in last year. Though I would like to point out that our performance did improve dramatically during the final quarter of the year. During the first 3 quarters, we had started spending the money on the new inpatient ward block, and we had cash pressures due to the deficit. In the final quarter, we were able to draw down that money, which helped us to pay our suppliers more readily, and we've maintained a higher level of payment to our suppliers during this financial year. We also breached the break-even duty due to the deficit. We've now, cumulatively over a 3-year period, are in net deficit to 16-17. Looking forward, though, to 17-18, our plan for this financial year. Rob's already alluded to the fact the impact of the tariff changes that we've had to accept in this financial year, but we'll continue to try to fight against and improve going forward, has had a detrimental impact on our finances. We continue to battle against some of the workforce shortages, and as a result, we've got a current business plan of an £18.2 million deficit for this year, which we are, though, on course to deliver. We've currently not accepted a control total set by NHSI for this financial year, though there are continuing discussions on that. In terms of capital, the biggest again is the new inpatient ward block. We'll be spending in excess of £33 million planned within this financial year, and as the scheme is on or ahead of plan, we will be spending that money. We also had planned to spend £6 million on the Western Development Zone enabling works. This is the works that enabled us to move off of that land site and therefore sell it, which eventually generates a contribution that will pay for the new inpatient ward block. There are various other sort of backlog maintenance schemes in the estate, medical equipment replacement and upgrade of imaging facilities, and the one that we missed off there, we're going to plan to spend about £1.1 million on IT during this financial year.
I've got to answer this question of the quality of patient care in the RNOH. I've bunched them into 2 bits which I think are really important to our patients. Patient experience and safety when you come and have your services delivered here in the RNOH. And so, first things first, National Inpatient Survey. So I know we've said thank you to the staff lots already today, but thank you again because we've done really well this year on a National Inpatient Survey. There's a massive improvement. So 4th most improved trust nationally in terms of our National Inpatient Survey. Amongst the best in 4 of the 10 domains that are applicable in the National Inpatient Survey. The best in the country, not second best, the best in the country for seeking feedback from our patients. And the best in the country, again, not second best, for the overall view of services that we provide here. Now, just in terms of these boxes, I should just explain what they mean in case you want to know. So, essentially, this line here, that's the red box is the worst 20% performing trusts. The amber box is the 60% in the middle in the pack, and the green box is the 20% best performing trusts in the country. And we're either in that box or very near to that box in all of those indicators. So we're very, very proud of that this year. That's not to say, however, we always get it right. And to balance that, we do get concerns and complaints raised by patients. So this data shows you our complaints rate versus all other specialist providers in the NHS. Obviously, the other trusts are not labelled in there, but what I can reveal is that we are the best performing in terms of orthopaedic specialist providers. And we take these very seriously. And the kind of things that patients tell us that we don't always get right are things about how to access our services, but I think that's going to improve now that our referral to treatment times have improved, and they're so good that the Secretary of State has written to us to tell us that they're so good. Issues with our transport services, which we pay a company called G4S to provide for us, which don't always go right. And issues of communication are the themes that patients come back and tell us we don't always get right. And we're working to try and make those things better, because even though we're the best orthopaedic provider in terms of our complaints rate, we want to be the best specialist provider in terms of the number of complaints that patients raise around us. So that's the metrics in terms of patient experience. In terms of the safety ones, so the first one I want to talk to you about is a metric we call harm-free care, which is a nationally reported metric. And essentially this is an audit that every provider in the NHS undertakes every month. And we measure the amount of harm that has happened to patients in relation to things like pressure ulcers that they develop in hospital, and falls where they've had harm, where they've developed a urinary infection when they've got a urinary catheter in place, and where they've developed a venous thromboembolism, so a deep vein thrombosis, or the worst case scenario, a pulmonary embolism. What you can see with the blue line is that the national average harm rate across the National Health Service. The red line is all of the harms in the RNOH. However, a proportion of those harms, patients come to us with those harms. So they come from the community or from other hospitals with a pressure ulcer, for example. When you exclude those and you just look at harms that the patient acquired here at the RNOH, you can see that patients have less harm in this organisation than they do on average across the National Health Service, which is something that we should be proud of. If that showed no harms, then I would be worried about that data, because patients do get harmed in the NHS from time to time, and when that happens, we investigate it and we learn from it and we try to fix that. So I think that's something for us to be proud of, that the harm levels are low. Another safety measure, probably the ultimate safety measure that we measure across the NHS, is mortality. So the number of patients who die in hospital. So this is what's called a POSSUM score. So the yellow line is the level of expected death in this organisation based on the case mix complexity and the comorbidities, the other illnesses that our patients have. So if the number of patients died that you would expect to die for the complexity of the patients we have here, the score would be 1. The actual deaths in the organisation is the blue line. So what this graph's telling you is that far fewer patients, significantly fewer patients, die in this organisation than you would expect based on the other medical conditions that they've got and the case mix complexity that we do. So this is, as I say, the ultimate safety measure. And when we talk about this metric with our commissioners, NHS England, and when we have the quality meetings and what have you, they're astonished by this outcome, because it is absolutely something for the organisation to be proud of. And as Rob says, not resting on our laurels and investigating and reviewing to identify the learning from it is something that we take very seriously. I think the other question this addresses is, you always have that question, don't you, about the safety of single speciality organisations that are standalone, and this is a really strong metric for us to stand up and say our data shows us that we continue to provide safe services as a single speciality standalone organisation with all of the support that we put in. That being said, we're doing a lot at the minute in order to change the way we look after patients. And that's around how we organise our medical workforce, how we train staff on the wards to recognise sick patients, the technology that we give them to help recognise sick patients, and also services like our outreach service, which are expert critical care nurses who can come onto the ward and care for sick patients. And the final graph from me is around pressure ulcers. As a nurse, as the lead nurse of the organisation, I take this one very seriously. When you go back in terms of pressure ulcers in the NHS, these used to develop because patients weren't turned frequently enough when they couldn't move their position well enough. They didn't have adequate nutrition. They didn't have adequate assessments of their risks undertaken, and patients would develop them classically in their sacral area on their back here. And they would be awful and devastating for patients, and they would take a long time to heal. In this graph, those are represented, those kinds of pressure ulcers, where it's pressure from something like the bed are represented by the darker blue. The bigger issue that we have as an organisation are what we call device-related pressure ulcers. So those are pressure ulcers from essentially any medical device that touches the skin. So that might be a plaster of Paris, that might be a nasogastric tube going into somebody's nose so that we can give them food and other substances directly into their stomach. It might be from a cannula that we've got in their hand, which is going into their vein for us to give them medicines directly into their vein. It could be from a number of different things. And that's the biggest focus for us currently. That's what causes most pressure ulcers in this organisation. I'm also very proud to say that very serious pressure ulcers, category 3 and category 4 pressure ulcers, are quite rare in this organisation, which is great, and something which certainly, if you look back in any organisation in the NHS 10 plus years ago, those were more prevalent than they are now. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of quality here at the RNOH. There's lots in there for us to be very proud of. Thank you very much.
Professor Paul Fish. And before that, you heard Trevor Mayhew with the Finance Report.
Dr Rui Loureiro is our engineering lead, UCL's Institute for Healthcare Engineering at RNOH Stanmore, head of Aspire's Create for Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology of UCL. And I think we always try at these annual general meetings to give a flavour of the real work of the hospital out there on the ground, the really exciting stuff beyond the sort of corporate headlines that I've been giving. And it's great that Rui's come along again this year to show us some real examples of the great world-leading work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Over to you.
So thank you for having me. It's been 3.5 years since I moved to UCL and to Stanmore. And in the process, we've been building a new team, very much focusing on delivering the next generation of technologies that will help patients and will have impact in their lives. So because I understand I only have 10 minutes, thereabout, I will concentrate on a few examples of the work we're doing and what we mean by patient impact. I must say I'm very fortunate because I work in this amazing environment. I used to be the engineer knocking on clinicians' doors and say, I've developed this. Do you think you can use it for your patients? Now we're working alongside the clinicians together, trying to answer clinical needs with the aid of the next generation of technologies. So, and the range of things we do are quite substantial. So from the biological side, we're trying to engineer new tissue, repair of damaged nerves, looking at how we can get bones to grow, to developing artificial joints that will allow us to walk better, to looking really at the cutting edge of biology, stem cell technology. How can we use these technologies in a way that will influence the next generation of therapeutics? I must say we are world leaders. Our clinicians at Stanmore are world leaders in nerve grafting and everything to do with the nerve injuries. The peripheral nerve injury unit is second to none. We also do a lot of work with neuromodulation, so it's using other forms of stimulation to get the nervous system to react to a certain stimulus. And we use this to look at the next generation of prosthetics, so we call it neuroprosthetics, linking the nervous system to the mechanics, to the electronics, and very much trying to understand the biomechanics, the way we move, how impairment influences the way we move, and how can we overcome the issues. Robotics. I'll show you a few examples of the ground work we're doing in robotics. Robotics that are used to help someone who might be paralyzed to stand up, to take a few steps perhaps being able to have enough independence so they can walk up and down the stairs, maybe one day even walk outside their own home and live a normal life. We're also working on rehabilitation engineering from across the board in trying to understand the processes, trying to improve them, and trying to introduce technologies that will allow clinicians to do more. I would like to start by showing you a few examples of what I mean by translational projects and what they mean to patient impact. So some of the things we've been looking at is how, starting with the humble wheelchair, how can we make the wheelchair better? So we've been looking at how can we improve the interfaces so individuals can use their wheelchairs in a more intuitive way, releasing their cognitive load so they can concentrate on engaging with the environment and the individuals in that environment rather than worrying whether or not I'm going to get through the doorway. And we've been looking at how we can do this, but also how we can translate some of that knowledge to newer technologies. So for instance, I'm sure you've seen some of these devices. So exoskeletons is a buzzword, exoskeleton. The media uses it frantically. And We want to develop an exoskeleton that's going to be usable. Okay, we are not jumping on the bandwagon, and as any engineer would stand before you would say, oh yes, I can build an exoskeleton, I'm going to do it tomorrow. We don't want to do that because we want to understand first how to get those devices to really be usable. It's no use to have one of those devices that cannot walk on carpet. It's not use to have one of those devices that will not allow you to go out to your garden, maybe allow you to do some gardening, will allow you to live a normal life. So we're trying to understand the processes from the physiology, from the interfaces, so that we can develop these devices in a better way. The other work we're doing is really trying to understand pain. Neuropathic pain in particular, which leads to chronic pain. The processes are complex, and there are two main projects that we are working on as we speak. There is a project on spasticity, that we're trying to understand the mechanisms that lead to chronic spasticity. So this is rigidity of the limbs, the joints, that causes a lot of pain. Trying to develop toolkits that will allow clinicians to evaluate and manage the condition in a better way, but more importantly, providing tools so that the patients themselves can manage the condition before it becomes chronic. Other work we're doing in chronic pain relates to the loss of a limb, and often called phantom limb pain, which is feeling the pain of the missing limb, which is quite extraordinary. This is one of our patients, a lady, 46, mother of 3, living an amazing life until one day her middle finger got stuck. She couldn't move it. Okay. The clinical team went through everything you can imagine to treat this patient. And in the end, nothing worked. They had no solution but to amputate the finger. Okay. Middle finger was amputated. 3 months on, the other finger started curling down, the wrist was curling down, the elbow was flexing back, the shoulder was already flexing backwards. Team again had no option but to amputate, to carry out a transradial amputation of the limb. That solved the problem, stabilized the condition, but this lady was left, in addition to the initial pain, which related to the complex regional pain syndrome, with phantom limb pain, living with it for 2 years. It affected her quality of life. She could no longer take walks to the park with her family. She could no longer walk the dogs, until she engaged with us in a groundbreaking clinical study. This is her using one of our virtual reality systems. So the paradigm is really simple. With the virtual reality glasses on, all of a sudden, she's able to see a different world. And what she can see is the missing limb back. She can look at her hands and see the missing hand back. And our hypothesis is, by doing this, we're tricking the brain into believing that everything is okay, the hand is there, okay, you can carry on, go ahead with your day-to-day business. Here she is, stacking cubes. Okay. Her residual limb is connected to a robot. The robot senses every move that she makes and reacts to it. But more importantly, as she picks up those cubes, she feels as if they were real. In other words, she feels the weight properties, she feels the textures, she feels the collisions, as you would. Her pain was 4.5 on a 5 scale. That is almost as bad as it can get. After one session, her pain came down to 1, and from the second session onwards to 0. And this has been sustained over 12 weeks. It's fantastic, isn't it? But the story doesn't end there, unfortunately. She completed our study, and she went back to her clinical team, and she said, I've been in this wonderful trial. Okay, I don't feel pain anymore. Okay, but the team was still very concerned that her muscles in her shoulder were quite weak, and she would be at risk of dislocating the shoulder. So they decided to do a procedure, and that procedure consisted in doing a nerve block. Can you guess what happened next? Unfortunately, they made it worse. And this is a very good example of the type of patients that Stanmore treats. We get referrals like this every day. This lady got referred to us, to one of our neurosurgeons, who was very vocal towards the treatment received and said, Rui, we have to do something for this patient. We have proof from her engagement in our clinical trial that she would benefit from a bionic limb. So we set ourselves on a mission to get her one. Unfortunately, bionic limbs, the good ones, they cost in excess of £30,000. And we will be able to get one for her in the next 5 years. So, with the support of the RNOH charity, we put in a case for innovative patient treatment. So what we'll be doing in our lab, ladies and gentlemen, will be 3D printing a bionic hand, which will be made to measure to this particular patient, which will be up and running in about 2 months. We will provide training to get it to control the hand, and we're going to be giving this hand for the patient to take home. And this will cost us less than £4,000. We believe and we hope, if we see benefits, that this could be turned into a service that our hospital could provide at a fraction of the cost. Other work we do is on developing better tools for our surgeons. And this is an example of complex hip revisions. So what we're doing is creating the best 3D maps. So when we are presented with a case like this, with the enormous deformity of the pelvis, we can actually develop custom-made implants that will be effective and long-lasting. In doing so, what we're trying to do is to design the best path also for the drill, so that we avoid other tissues. So when surgeons are drilling through, that they don't by mistake drill to an artery or a vein. And what we're trying to do is also use imaging to check what is achieved. In the process, we are developing training paradigms using technology, training simulators using virtual reality. And this is an example of those devices where the surgeon is also able to practice as if it was in the operating table, the specific procedure, over and over again, and have that compared to the gold standard. So our vision really for this is, in a not so far away future, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, I dare say, we'll be using imaging data, reconstructing that data into accurate 3D models, not only the bones, but all the other structures, soft tissues, using that to develop the best possible implant for that particular patient, but using that to develop interactive models which allow us for simulation of complex procedures step by step that can be practiced through a simulator before we go to the operating table. And we see the advantage of doing this in clinical practice will be minimizing the risks, optimizing the procedures, and hopefully seeing a greater impact in patient recovery. So this is just a snapshot of what we are doing right now at Stanmore. I would very much invite you to come and visit us anytime. Come and see what we do in our research labs, in our clinics. And if you happen to be around April time next year, come to our open day and see what we are about. So, thank you.
Okay, well, it just remains for me to say a few words in summing up. I think you'll all agree that we've made tremendous progress this year. There are some wonderful achievements that you've seen, but there remain some challenges, so we can't afford to rest on our laurels. I started with the thank you, so I'll end with the thank you, go with the theme started there. I'd like to thank especially Rob, whose leadership of the hospital I think has been exemplary in what has been troubled times, and I think we've seen many chief executives sailing off out of their posts elsewhere, but Rob's been a stalwart here and been here for many years, and I think a lot of the success of the hospital is down to him. I also want to thank his team, some of whom we've seen here today, who have also gone beyond the call of duty really in helping make the RNOH the successful place that it is today. I want to thank the RNOH charity who do great work for us. If you're so inclined, please visit their site. There is a donate button there, so if you're feeling flush, please go there. But thank you to them for the work they do, because a lot of the things that you've seen here today would not be possible without them. I want to thank Radio Brockley, who've been sat at the back patiently recording, and I'd like to thank them for all the work they do on behalf of our patients and our staff as well. And lastly, but by no means least, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I look forward to seeing you again, not quite the same time next year. I believe it's the 14th of September. It's a Friday afternoon. I'm not quite sure why we picked a Friday afternoon, but anyway, hopefully we'll all be here to celebrate another successful year.
But also the open day in April.
The open day in April is the opportunity to see the hospital in action, the R&D, so I would urge you all to come. We will publicise that on the website and through other means. So thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
I'm with Rob Hurd, the RNOH Chief Executive, who's spared me a few minutes after the annual general meeting. Good afternoon, Rob.
Good afternoon, Keith, and thanks again to Radio Brockley for covering the event today.
Our pleasure as always. Thank you for letting us be here. Another monumental year for the RNOH, new build going up, record low infection rates, lots of fantastic things going on, but major financial challenges within the NHS and the RNOH as well.
Yes, I think that pretty much sums it up, Keith. I mean, I think the overall direction of travel for the RNOH here in Stanmore is a positive one, but we're constantly buffeted by the sort of environment we work within. And you know, I sometimes look back over the history. If you look at some of the posters around the teaching centre here, we've had the annual general meeting, some of the history of the trust, and finances have always been a challenge to this organisation. And you know, we're trying to do good things for the people that need our services, but we're in competition for resources in a national health service that has much need all over the place. So it's great that in that environment we're rebuilding the hospital. It's great that in that environment we're continuing high quality patient care for those that we treat, and it's great that we're doing, and some of the academic work that Rui Loureiro has been showing us today is absolutely fantastic. This is truly world leading stuff, and it's happening here and now at the RNOH. So I think it's very exciting times, as you say, but at the same time we've got to face up to the money challenges that we face here and now as well.
Yes, the research and development that Rui described again today, the Aspire Create programme, is absolutely outstanding. I was stunned to see that they can fit that lady that was used in the film with an artificial limb for £4,000. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there are many examples, of things that we do here in partnership with engineers and doctors and nurses and allied health professionals that give quality of life to patients, that have research trials that provide things like the example you've just given, and ultimately you so often find that through innovation you can keep the costs down of things. Talking about very expensive bionic limbs for tens of thousands of pounds. And Rui's department looking at 3D printing and cutting to the fraction of the cost and transforming somebody's life. So that just shows, although we do have financial challenges, we can offer something back to the world in terms of meeting up to those financial challenges, because quality of life turns people happier, they become productive, they go to work, they become, they're less of a burden on society. And so that's what's so important about the work that we do, giving quality of life to people and being economically productive and happy in their lives and their quality of life.
Fantastic. Now, the UCL has a long-standing relationship with the RNOH, which is being cemented even more. And I can only imagine that's going to help build this R&D programme even further.
Yes, and Rui is a UCL professor, and we have 40, 50 UCL staff. We have many of RNOH staff who have, UCL staff, more staff who have RNOH honorary contracts. We're a partnership. This is an academic campus with UCL as our prime partner, and part of our rebuild plans, they're fundamental to those in the new academic facilities that are going to be built in the bioengineering hub. And as I said in the annual general meeting, these things do take time, but every step is forwards, every trajectory is upwards, and we're getting there. It just takes time, but it's very exciting.
Great, thank you for your time, and well done to you and the board once again for keeping the RNOH on the up and in the positive.
Thank you very much, Keith, and thanks again to Radio Brockley.
Thanks, Rob.
And that concludes our coverage of the 2017 RNOH Trust AGM. And thanks to our reporter Keith Reeves for that final piece there with CEO Rob Hurd. Don't forget you can hear a different edition of Brockley News Extra every weekday lunchtime from 12 noon, plus Monday evenings at 8 p.m, as well as a brand new edition of the main Brockley News programme every Sunday at 7 p.m. Stay tuned with us at Radio Brockley. We're on the air 24 hours a day. You've been listening to Brockley News Extra from Radio Brockley. I'm Ron Laver, and I look forward to being with you again soon. Bye now.